Let's talk about daylight. It's funny how you can live on this spinning, tilted Earth for as many decades as you like, and then October goes past and the clocks change, and at least in England, we can't help but remark, oh, the days are awfully short, or something similar. It's something quite remarkable about us as humans that 365 days or thereabouts seems just enough for us to completely forget that this entirely 100% predictable phenomenon is coming, and it seems to hit us as a bit of a surprise, as if this is a unique occasion that the days have just decided to wrap up at 4 p.m. Now, in England, this of course is paired with weather that is less than ideal, either cloudy or out and out rainy, which means that you feel this in a general way when it starts getting dark at maybe 3 o'clock, and you feel somehow cheated. But perhaps it's best represented on those days when, lucky us, the sky stays clear long enough for there to be a colourful sunset. This would remind you that the movement of the seasons is not purely of time, but of place. As a teenager with what was, at least by the standards of now, a desperately primitive phone camera, I would run between the different vantage points in Chichester, of which there were only a handful from which you could catch a decent sunset composition over the rooftops or trees. And this would vary from season to season. Spots that would yield great colours in winter would be of no use in the summer months as the sun progressed around the horizon. And taking Bournemouth as an example, the beach forms a crescent that inclines gently to the southeast. In summer, this means anyone wanting to catch sunrise or sunset from the main beach is going to be disappointed. The northeast direction of sunrise and the northwest direction of sunset means that all the spectacular colours and views are going to be taking place well behind the cliffs. The solution, very specific to our borough, is to catch sunsets in summer at sandbanks. You get an incredible display across the shallows of Poole Bay, which forms a mirror for the colours. But circling back to winter, you are also presented with this opportunity. While most days the clouds prevent the sunrise from being anything worth observing, on the clear frosty mornings, if you haven't got anywhere else to be, you can be on top of the cliffs, ballpark 8 o'clock, at least in January, pretty tame call time by anyone's standards, and you are greeted with the most spectacular of shows. You can take it in from top of the cliffs, or you can descend down to the level of the beach and catch it in between the spans of the pier. Anyone who's been around the channel a while will have probably heard us reference it frequently. Bournemouth is where we're based now, and it might seem strange that in all the time we've been doing this, it's taken us forever to do episodes from England, or in fact the British Isles. After a long build-up, we began the Hill Forts episodes last year, which was a start, and apart from some episodes on Orkney and Shetland, it's actually kind of funny. It's not that we haven't been filming in England, it's actually the opposite. On top of everything we've already got, we still have so much left to film that we just couldn't bring ourselves to release any of it because we're getting it all stored up for these massive series. At time of writing, our Norman footage, for example, clocks in at around 1.9 terabytes and counting. This is cathedrals, castles, earthworks, numerous churches, like some tight country lanes. It's a lot, but we've still got a lot to catch as well. I don't know if it's obvious from the channel, but if you watch our videos, we do a lot, really as much as we can under blue skies. No shock, this is ostensibly out of our control. It really just means we're more choosy about when we do and don't head out. But as far as the look of what we do, it's not complicated really. Not only do I feel like a completely different human being on days with clear blue skies, but the footage you get just always looks 10 times better. The colours come out in a way that makes the footage you caught on a grey day seem suffocatingly flat and dull by comparison. Professional photographers with much more skill and greater equipment and taste may hang their head in despair when I say this, And sure, the blue skies do come with a downside. For example, it's good to get out in the early mornings when not many people are around, but sometimes the shadows are a bit sharp, so your contrasts can be kind of harsh. Or if you go to places with lighter stone by the middle of the day, take for example this castle in Šibenik in Croatia. It reflects the sunlight so strongly that the camera kind of ends up treating it like a light source, and it can blow out your shots if you're not paying attention. But in general, the way it makes the colours and contrasts pop, this makes it more than worth it, to me at least. But then there's England, and famously, perhaps the thing for which we're most renowned, less than great weather. If there's a clear day forecast, and I can fit it around work, these days come at a high premium. Now, to be clear, we're not just talking about not raining or even just mostly sunny days. We're talking blue skies all the way across. Those, when subtracted from working days, we might only get single digits of those in a year that we can make use of. This leaves us with a problem. November rolls around, and if you're lucky, you get maybe 2 or 3 of these blue shooting days. We normally use those to get out kind of locally, to get the autumn leaves in the New Forest, for example. Anyway, then December kicks off with a tremendous fuss and gaudy plastic flashing lights under grey skies, and then all of a sudden it dumps you in January, and you still have 3 more months of near impenetrable grey. Less substantially, the mix of this and it getting dark at what feels like 1 minute past noon plays havoc with my mood. I'm doubtless far from alone in this, but I become pretty gloomy for nearly this entire half of the year. And can I just say, it feels embarrassing. I know seasonal affective disorder is extremely common. I think most people in England would feel it to some degree or other. But it's just, on the days when I'm having a really down evening or, I just feel bad, there can be numerous other things going on too, worries about money or all sorts of, the problems that come with being an adult. But, you feel like there's something really major, really important that's kind of getting you down, whilst also knowing that, a lot of it is just that it's cloudy outside. I know that on a blue sky day, I will feel much, much better. And on a gloomy day, I'm just much more likely to feel sad and down. And it's just embarrassing that there isn't something more substantial behind it all. And it's not helped that the one thing that would lift my mood, getting out, filming, and both adding to these huge projects that have been years in the making, but also feeling like we're making progress, not just wasting the days. Well, that goes out the window, and I end up feeling just so stuck. That's one of the things that really sticks with me from the plague years. That winter at the beginning of 2021 really seemed to drag on for several lifetimes. Just not being able to plan ahead or really hope for anything. Confined to the postcode of the borough and places I normally love, I kind of began to resent. We were just walking around them in circles with no option to get much further afield. And, in more recent times, more than just being a bit glum, I find myself really losing hope, feeling like I'm just stuck in place. So, as I've been teasing for the last couple of episodes, I decided I was going to do things differently over winter. There are some places that, do look kind of flat and uninspiring under cloud cover. To make a generalisation, things like landscapes with short grass, so maybe the Downs in Sussex or the Isle of Wight. They do look fairly flat when it's cloudy. But then you get out to different biomes, out to the moors or the mountains and the rocky hillsides, or to the coast and the more spectacular cliffs. Then the grey really starts to be an asset rather than a drawback. We already released our episodes on Shropshire, and when I'm there amongst the rugged hills, I don't mind the cloud. In fact, it actually really makes some of the shots. You get these great compositions that are far more varied than I would have got with just a blue sky. So here was the plan. Throwing our usual convention to the winds, we are going to make the most of winter, not treat it as a problem, but as an opportunity. There are drawbacks, speaking of the winds. If there's even moderate wind, it can make aerial shots an issue. I have come close a handful of times to losing the DJI entirely. When I've sent it up, then I've tried to point it back towards us and it's just stuck in place, like fully rotating but unable to get the better of the headwinds. Or worse yet, you see the distance counter going up and up, like, bye, I'm making a break for the horizon and freedom now. It was nice knowing you. More obviously, there's also the rain. I think you'll find that, contrary to the stereotypes, this is actually less common than you think. There are some parts of the UK that have been in drought over the last 18 months. Water levels in reservoirs getting very low. There's numerous days that are blanketed with a thick grey, but it's still a minority of these that actually produce significant rain. Now, that's not really an actual meteorological fact about the Dorset region, it's cold hard speculation, but rain is less of a barrier to getting out and about than it might first appear. So the hope was to really lean into the clouds. So this would doubtless be easier when you're out in a dramatic landscape, say Dartmoor for example, rather than a suffocatingly bland suburb on a gloomy Thursday lunchtime. But I was hoping it would still help me feel more purposeful, rather than just seeing the 5 months from November to March as a big hole in our schedule. It also affords us a chance to dig into some of the footage we've captured in previous years but never baked into episodes. And as you might have noticed, it's going to be just a little bit more autobiographical. I try and put the locations and the history front and centre in all of these, but unavoidably, you'll see that it only really makes sense if I give the context of some of the stuff I was doing. So this episode is serving as an introduction to the series. Full disclosure, because of the amount we still have to release, we took about 6 months just on hill forts, and I got this footage from Albania, Germany, Italy, kind of all over. It's practically burning a hole in my hard drives. So for most of this series, what I'm showing you is actually 12 months out of phase. I didn't want to draw attention to it, but I feel like I'd be caught in a pretty obvious lie by other folks who also have an eye on the weather. If I was trying to maintain the impression that this was just a few weeks ago. So winding back, just for a little bit of context of where we were at, it was the dying days of December. I usually use the Twixtmas days between the 25th and New Year's Eve to have an editing blitz, and this year was no different, but there was virtually no let-up in the grey outside. We had some nice time with the wider family over the holidays, getting a bit of time in Chichester, making some homemade mince pies from a recipe that, my mum's had passed down to her from 3 generations previous. I did sneak out on Christmas Eve to catch a little bit of mist at Boxgrove Priory, and even just over to the sunken lane along what was once the Roman road of Stane Street. You do get a lot of togs at this location, and actually had a good chat with another guy who'd had the exact same idea. We chatted about obsolete media. Yeah, this was all nice, but it was at best a distraction from the fact that it was the darkest time of the year, and I was really feeling pretty low. This was New Year's Eve, a stormy, grey sundown. So for all the reasons we've already discussed, I wanted to kind of get out of this rut, and you'll see from what's coming next some of the things that we had in the diary. Because of the conditions and just the available hours of daylight, these are more small-scale episodes than perhaps people are used to us putting out. To give you a look at what's coming up, we decided to head to the Lake District in the first few days of January. Just chance it. There's no shortage of dramatic landscapes, and they really sing under grey skies. We'll be doing an episode from Dartmoor. That was one of the first places we thought of when we were thinking about this concept. It's so deliciously moody when it's cloudy. There's also a couple of trips we did to Wales as spring got closer. We even got some blue skies as a bonus, and a few other things. I'm still kind of deciding whether or not we've got enough material to make those into episodes, but you'll see. The very next episode you'll see in this playlist, we actually jumped the gun and released this last year, but it was the first leg of the trip to the lakes as we drove to the Scottish border in just one day. Not a heroic effort by any means, but just keeping to the theme of smaller scale trips, this one was actually pretty great. So keep an eye out for the Grey Days playlist, and if you enjoyed the music in the background, it's ours. We make all the music for these episodes, and you can catch it on bandcamp.com. You can also find us on Blue Sky. Because these episodes take a long time to put together, we mentioned our backlog already, you can find us posting more regularly on Blue Sky about what's happening sort of week to week. And yes, please subscribe. You'll probably have to hit the bell for that to really take effect, otherwise sometimes the platform just doesn't show you our videos, but we'll catch you very soon.